I thought I bought love, but I bought a one-way ticket to hell. I snatched the phone from her hands and smashed it against the wall. The screen shattered into pieces. She screamed, but I was done listening to her excuses. The glass tinkled as it hit the cheap tile floor of the bungalow. It sounded like ice settling in a drink I desperately needed. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, never from fear, from rage. Pure, unadulterated rage at the audacity of this place. I looked at Ritana. She was huddled in the corner. Her hands were over her face. She was crying, or at least she was making the noises of crying. I knew better now. I knew that sound. It was the sound of a predator playing the victim. You have to understand something about me. I am a salesman. I move metal. Back in Manchester, I could sell a flood-damaged hatchback to a bloke who lives on a hill. I know people. I know leverage. I know when someone is trying to screw me, or so I thought. But here, the humidity rots your brain. It softens you. It makes you think you're a king just because you have a few pounds in your pocket and a passport that says United Kingdom. I looked at the broken phone. That was my lifeline. That was my connection to my bank accounts, my lawyers, my sanity. And I had just destroyed it because I could not stand to see that picture one more time. The picture she sent to my wife back in Bolton. Let me rewind. Let me take you back before the sweat, before the mosquitoes, before the suffocating heat of this God-forsaken island. It started 3 months ago. I had just arrived in Pattaya. I was fresh off the plane. I had just finalized my divorce settlement. I had cash, a lot of it. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to be someone else. I wanted to be Samuel the expat, Samuel the king. I walked into a restaurant off Second Road, not a bar. I was done with the bars. I wanted class. I wanted something real. The place smelled of lemongrass and burning chilies. It was authentic, or at least it looked authentic enough for me. That was where I saw her. Ritana. She was not waiting tables. She was behind the counter. She was shouting orders at a scrawny boy washing dishes. She wore a white chef's coat that was 2 sizes too big for her. She looked fierce. She looked like she was in charge. I liked that. I sat down at the bar. I ordered a beer. She slammed it down in front of me. She didn't smile. She didn't ask me for a drink. She looked me in the eye and asked me what I wanted to eat. I told her to surprise me. She scoffed. She actually scoffed at me. She turned around and fired up the wok. The flames licked the ceiling. The sound of sizzling oil filled the room. It was violent. It was loud. It was perfect. 10 minutes later, she slid a plate of basil pork in front of me. It was spicy. Not tourist spicy. Real spicy. It burned my lips. It made my eyes water. It made me feel alive for the first time in years. I told her it was the best thing I'd ever eaten. She wiped her hands on her apron. She looked at me, really looked at me. She saw the gold watch on my wrist. She saw the crisp polo shirt. She saw the hunger in my eyes that had nothing to do with food. She told me her name was Ritana. She told me she was 22. She told me she was tired of cooking for idiots who did not know the difference between ginger and galangal. I laughed. I told her I was different. I told her I was a connoisseur. I told her I sold luxury automobiles, Jaguars, Land Rovers, machines of power and grace. I lied about the luxury part. I sold mid-range sedans with high mileage. But here, in the neon glow of the city, the lie felt like the truth. We left together that night. Not to a hotel, to a market. She wanted to buy fresh fish. She said the morning catch was coming in. She dragged me through the wet, slippery aisles of the Naklua market at 4 a.m. The smell was overpowering. Fish guts, brine, rotting ice. I should have been disgusted. I should have been back in my air-conditioned room. But I was fascinated. I watched her haggle with the fishmongers. She was vicious. She screamed. She pointed. She threw a fish back into the bucket because the eyes were cloudy. She saved me 40 baht on a sea bass. That is about 1 pound. She acted like she had just won the lottery. I looked at her and thought, this is it. This is the one. She is smart with money. She is hardworking. She is not like the others. She is not a leech. She is a partner. I was a fool, a complete and utter bloody fool. The first month was paradise. I moved into a condo in Yomtien, sea view, 2 bedrooms. Ritana moved in with me. She took over the kitchen immediately. She threw out my instant coffee. She threw out my bread. She stocked the fridge with strange vegetables and jars of dark pungent sauces. She cooked for me 3 times a day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She made soups that cleared my sinuses. She made curries that put me into a food coma. I started to gain weight. I started to slow down. I stopped going to the gym. Why bother? I had Ritana. She treated me like royalty. She laid out my clothes in the morning. She polished my shoes. She massaged my feet while we watched television. I felt powerful. Back home, I was nobody. I was the guy you avoided at the pub because he would try to sell you an extended warranty. Here, I was the master of the house. I was the provider. I decided to upgrade my status. The tourist visa was annoying. The border runs were for peasants. I wanted permanence. I wanted respect. I bought the elite visa. It cost me 600,000 baht, cash. I remember walking into the agency. The air conditioning was freezing. The agent was a petite woman with a fake smile. I slapped the stack of cash on the desk. It made a heavy thud. I signed the papers without reading them. Why should I read them? I was paying them. They worked for me. That is how the world works. Money talks and the rest is just noise. Ritana was with me. She stared at the gold membership card when it arrived. She ran her finger over the embossed letters of my name. She looked at me with wide eyes. She told me I was a very important man. She told me nobody could touch me now. She told me I was safe. I believed her. I puffed out my chest. I told her that in England, men like me ran the show. I told her that the Thais could learn a thing or two about efficiency from us. She smiled. It was a tight smile. It did not reach her eyes, but I was too busy admiring my own reflection in the glass door to notice. That was the first mistake, thinking I was the one holding the leash. The cracks started to show in the second month, small things, tiny little fractures in the perfect image. She started taking photos, constantly, not of the sunset, not of the food, of me. She took photos of me sleeping. She took photos of me in the shower, through the frosted glass. She took photos of me when I was drunk, passed out on the sofa with my mouth open. I asked her why. I told her to stop it. She giggled. She said she wanted to remember every moment. She said she loved me so much she wanted to keep me in her pocket. It was flattering at first. Then it became annoying. Then it became weird. One night, I caught her going through my phone. I had left it on the charger. I came out of the bathroom and saw the blue light reflecting on her face. Her thumb was scrolling fast. I shouted. I grabbed the phone. She looked innocent. She told me she was just checking the time. She told me she wanted to see if her mother had called. I checked the history. Nothing. She was fast. Or maybe I was just paranoid. I told myself I was paranoid. Why would she spy on me? I gave her everything. I gave her an allowance. I bought her gold. I let her drive the motorbike I rented. But there was something else. A man. We were walking down Beach Road one evening. The sun was setting, turning the sky a bruised purple. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust and grilling meat. A man on a motorbike pulled up next to us. He was big for a Thai. Tattoos covered his arms, scaly dragons and ancient script. He wore a heavy gold chain around his neck. He looked like trouble. He looked like the kind of guy I would lock the car doors against back home. He looked at Ritana. He nodded. She stiffened. Her hand tightened on my arm. She looked down at the ground. He said something to her in Thai. It sounded harsh, guttural. She whispered something back. He laughed, a cold, hard laugh. Then he looked at me. He looked me up and down like I was a piece of meat hanging in a market stall. He grinned. His teeth were stained red from betel nut. Then he revved the engine and sped off into the traffic. I asked her who he was. I demanded to know. She told me he was her cousin. She told me he was a good boy, just misunderstood. She told me he ran a business on the islands, a rental business. I told her he looked like a gangster. I told her I did not want thugs around us. She stroked my arm. She cooed. She told me not to worry. She told me I was a big, strong man with an elite visa. She told me nobody would dare mess with me. She was good. She knew exactly which buttons to push. She knew my vanity was my Achilles heel. A week later, she started talking about a trip. She said she was bored of the city. She said the pollution was bad for her skin. She said she wanted to go to an island. She mentioned Koh Rin. I had never heard of it. I knew Koh Larn. I knew Summit. But Koh Rin, she told me it was exclusive. She told me it was a diving spot, deep water, clear currents, private beaches where nobody would bother us. She said her cousin could get us a deal. I hesitated. The cousin. The thug with the red teeth. But then she looked at me. She gave me that look, the one that promised things that I cannot say out loud, the one that made me forget about the heat and the noise and the nagging feeling in my gut that something was wrong. She told me we could rent a private boat, just us. We could bring a cooler of wine. We could sleep on the beach under the stars. It sounded romantic. It sounded like the life I had paid for. I agreed. I went to the bank the next day. I withdrew 50,000 baht just for spending money. I wanted to flash the cash. I wanted to show the cousin that I was not some cheap tourist. I was Samuel, the man with the elite visa. I came home and found her packing. She was putting things in a bag, not clothes. Strange things. A waterproof pouch for documents, a first aid kit, a bottle of something that looked like oil. I asked her what it was for. She told me it was for the mosquitoes. She told me the island was wild. Nature. I laughed. I told her I had insect repellent. I showed her the spray can I bought at the pharmacy. She just smiled, that tight, closed-lip smile. I should have checked the bag. I should have looked closer at the bottle. I should have asked why she was packing my passport in the waterproof pouch instead of leaving it in the safe. But I didn't. I was too busy thinking about the ocean, about the freedom, about how jealous my mates back in Manchester would be when I sent them pictures of me on a private beach with a beautiful young chef. We left the next morning. The taxi ride to the pier was quiet. Ritana was texting on her phone the whole time. Her fingers flew across the screen. I asked her who she was talking to. She told me it was her mother. She told me she was telling her mother we would be out of range for a few days. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I was the one paying the bills. I was the one in charge. We arrived at the pier. The sun was beating down. The smell of diesel and low tide was suffocating. And there he was. The cousin. He was standing next to a speedboat. But not just a speedboat. Next to it, bobbing in the water, were two jet skis, bright yellow, massive engines. They looked like beasts. He waved at us. The gold chain around his neck glinted in the sun. Ritana squeezed my hand. She told me her cousin had a surprise for us. She told me he brought the jet skis so we could have fun. I looked at the machines. I felt a stir of excitement. I had never ridden one. But how hard could it be? It was just an engine and a handlebar. I sold cars with 400 horsepower. This was a toy. I walked down the pier. My chest was puffed out. My sunglasses were on. I was ready to conquer the ocean. I didn't see the deep scratches on the hull of the jet ski on the left. They were covered with a layer of blue wax that matched the paint perfectly. I did not see the man standing in the shadows of the ticket booth, holding a camera with a long lens. I only saw the water, and the girl, and the reflection of a man who thought he was a king walking straight into the guillotine. "Hey!" I shouted at the cousin. I didn't bother learning his name. "Which one is mine?" The cousin grinned. He pointed to the one on the left, the one with the hidden scars. "For you, boss," he said in broken English. "Very fast, very good." I slapped him on the back. I felt generous. I felt superior. "Don't worry, mate," I said. "I'll handle it. I know how to drive." Ritana handed me a clipboard. It was a rental agreement. It was all in Thai. "Just sign, darling," she said. "It is just insurance. Standard procedure." I didn't even look at it. I scribbled my signature at the bottom. Samuel, the man who owned the world. I handed the clipboard back. The trap was set. The cage door had swung shut, and I had just locked it from the inside. We climbed onto the boat. The cousin fired up the engine. The roar was deafening. We sped away from the safety of the shore, heading out into the deep, dark blue. I looked back at the city shrinking behind us. I felt free. Little did I know, I was about to lose everything, my money, my dignity, my visa, and it all started with a scratch that I didn't even make. But right then, with the wind in my hair and Ritana's hand on my knee, I felt invincible. God, I was such a buffalo. The boat hit a wave and sprayed salt water into my face. It stung my eyes. I wiped it away and laughed. Ritana didn't laugh. She was looking at the horizon. Her face was set in stone. She looked like a soldier going into battle. I offered her a beer from the cooler. She shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "Later, when we celebrate." "Celebrate what?" I asked. She turned to me. Her eyes were dark pools, empty, cold. "Celebrate your holiday," she said. But the way she said it, it didn't sound like a holiday. It sounded like a funeral. I shrugged it off. I cracked the beer open. The foam spilled over my hand. I took a long drink. The alcohol hit my empty stomach. I felt a buzz. A warm, fuzzy feeling of contentment. I closed my eyes and let the sun burn my skin. I was Samuel. I was the king of Siam, and I was about to be dethroned. We took a private speedboat out to Koh Rin the next morning. I paid for the whole boat because I did not want to share my space with backpackers or Chinese tour groups. I wanted the ocean to myself. Ritana sat at the bow in a yellow bikini that looked expensive. I'd bought that for her too. She didn't smile at the wind or the waves. She was busy typing on her phone. When I asked who she was talking to, she told me it was her mother in the village. She said the buffalo was sick again. I laughed and told her to tell the buffalo to get a job. She put the phone away and handed me a plastic container. She had prepared lunch, spicy basil chicken and rice. She was always feeding me. It was part of her charm, I thought. The dutiful Thai woman taking care of her man. I ate the food while the boat slammed against the waves. The spices burned my throat, but I washed it down with a warm beer. We arrived at Koh Rin an hour later. It was paradise. White sand, turquoise water, and absolute silence. There were no bars here, no police stations, just a few other boats anchored offshore and the deep blue drop-off where the currents swirled. We set up camp on a pair of beach chairs under a blue tarp that smelled of mildew. The heat was oppressive. Even in the shade, the air felt thick and heavy like a wet towel wrapped around my face. Mosquitoes buzzed around my ankles. I swatted them away and looked out at the water. A guy on a larger boat nearby waved at me. He had 2 jet skis tied to the stern of his vessel. He shouted something about a special price. I looked at Ritana. She shrugged and said it might be fun. She said I looked strong enough to handle a big machine like that. Her flattery was like a drug. It went straight to my head and bypassed my brain completely. I waved the guy over. I rented the biggest ski he had, a black and green beast that looked fast. I didn't read the contract he held out on a clipboard. It was in Thai anyway. I just signed my name and threw my credit card down as a deposit. I was Samuel the car salesman. I knew how to handle contracts, and I knew how to handle engines. I climbed onto the machine and revved the engine. The noise shattered the peace of the island. I felt powerful. I tore across the water, leaving a white scar of foam behind me. I did donuts. I jumped waves. I pushed the throttle until my knuckles turned white. For 20 minutes, I was the master of the universe. I did not hit anything. I was sure of that. I stayed in deep water. I stayed away from the rocks. When my time was up, I steered the ski back to the boat. My chest was puffing with adrenaline. I expected applause. Instead, I got silence. The boat owner jumped down onto the ski as soon as I killed the engine. He didn't look at me. He looked at the bottom of the hull. He ran his hand along the fiberglass near the front. Then he shook his head and made a sucking sound through his teeth. That sound is the universal signal for expensive trouble in this country. I asked him what the problem was. He pointed to a scratch. It was barely visible. A hairline fracture in the gel coat no longer than my finger. He started speaking rapid Thai to Ritana. His voice was hard. He was not the smiling service worker anymore. He was a gangster collecting a debt. Ritana looked at the scratch and covered her mouth in shock. She turned to me with wide, fearful eyes. She told me he said the hull was cracked. She told me the water had got inside the engine compartment. She said the whole machine was ruined. I laughed in his face. I told him it was just a scratch and I probably didn't even do it. I told him I was an expert on vehicles and he was trying to rip me off. I stepped forward to intimidate him. I was 6 feet tall and broad. He was small and wiry. I thought size mattered. I was wrong. 2 other men appeared from the cabin of his boat. They were not smiling either. They held large metal wrenches in their hands. The isolation of Koh Rin suddenly felt very different. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was suffocating. There were no police here, no cameras, just me and 3 men who looked ready to crack my skull like a coconut. Ritana grabbed my arm. She begged me to be calm. She said these men were dangerous. She said they would call the Marine police and have me arrested for destruction of property. The word arrested cut through my alcohol haze. I had an elite visa. I had paid 600,000 baht for the privilege of living here without hassle. A criminal record would revoke it instantly. I would be deported. I would lose my condo. I would lose my illusion of being a king. I asked how much they wanted. The main guy held up 5 fingers. 50,000 baht, I guessed. It was robbery, but I could afford it. Ritana shook her head. She whispered that he wanted 50,000 US dollars. My jaw dropped. I screamed at them. I told them they were insane. I told them I knew the law. The man with the wrench took a step closer and tapped the metal against his palm. The sound was dull and heavy. Ritana stepped between us. She acted the hero. She started arguing with them in Thai. Her voice was high and pleading. She pointed at me and then at the sky and then at her phone. I watched her fight for me. I felt a surge of love for this woman defending me against the wolves. I did not know she was the one who had invited the pack. After 10 minutes of shouting, she came back to me. She looked exhausted. She said she had talked them down. She said they would accept 100,000 baht cash right now. $3,000. It was still extortion, but it was better than $50,000 or a Thai prison cell. I didn't have that much cash on me. Ritana said I could transfer it to her account and she would go to the ATM on the mainland to pay them later. She said they trusted her because she was Thai. It sounded logical. My brain was looking for a way out and she provided the door. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so bad I could hardly type the numbers. I transferred the money. 100,000 baht, gone in a second. The boat owner looked at his phone and nodded. The aggression vanished instantly. He smiled. He waved to me. He offered me a cold water. The switch was so fast it gave me whiplash. We took the speedboat back to Pattaya in silence. The sun was setting, but it didn't look beautiful anymore. It looked like a bruising on the sky. I felt sick. Not just the beer and the spicy chicken. I felt the sickness of a man who knows he has been beaten but is too proud to admit how. Back at the hotel, I needed to escape. I needed to sweat the toxins out of my body. I went down to the steam room in the hotel spa. I was the only one there. I turned the temperature up to the maximum. I poured water over the hot rocks until the room was a wall of white fog. I sat on the wooden bench and stared at the tiles. I couldn't breathe. The heat pressed against my chest. I closed my eyes and saw the scratch on the jet ski. It was old. I knew it was old. Dirt was embedded in the crack. Why hadn't I seen that before? Why had Ritana been so quick to agree with them? Why did the boat owner have her bank details so he could verify the transfer so quickly? The questions started to circle in my head like sharks. I gasped for air, but there was only steam. I reached into the pocket of my robe hanging on the hook. I found the small bottle Ritana had given me for my back pain. She said they were herbal muscle relaxants. She said they would make me feel like I was floating. I didn't care what they were anymore. I opened the bottle and dry swallowed 3 of them. Then I washed them down with the rest of the warm beer I had smuggled in. I leaned back against the hot wood. The room spun. The white steam turned into gray shapes. I was Samuel. I was the king, but my castle was made of steam and it was evaporating around me. The chemicals hit my bloodstream like a freight train. The fear evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard rage. I looked at my hands. They were steady now. I was Samuel from Manchester. I sold 200 cars a month to people smarter than these jungle scammers. I had an elite visa. That gold card in my wallet was not just plastic, it was a shield. It was proof that the Thai government wanted me here. It meant I was an investor, a VIP. I was not some sweaty backpacker they could shake down for a few thousand baht. I laughed out loud in the steam room. The sound echoed off the wet tiles. They thought they had me trapped. They thought I would pay 40,000 baht for a scratch on a plastic toy. I stood up. The dizziness was gone. The tramadol gave me a buzzing energy. I felt 10 feet tall. I had a plan. I would walk out there and I would call their bluff. I would demand to go to the main police station. I would demand to speak to the tourist police commander. I would wave my elite card in their faces until they apologized. I checked my pocket. My phone was there. I pulled it out and hit record. I was going to catch them in the act. I was going to ruin them. These peasants did not know who they were dealing with. I kicked the glass door open. It slammed against the wall with a satisfying crash. I marched out into the locker room. The air was cooler here. My skin was red and pulsing. Ritana was sitting on a bench near the lockers. She was smoking a cigarette. The jet ski owner was standing next to a man in a tight brown uniform, a police officer, or at least a man dressed like one. They looked up when I entered. Ritana did not look scared. She looked bored. That should have been my first warning, but I was too high on my own superiority to see it. I walked right up to the officer and shoved my phone in his face. I told him I was recording everything. I told him I was a personal friend of the British ambassador. I told him this was a shakedown and I was not paying a single satang. The officer blinked. He looked at the phone. Then he looked at me. He did not flinch. He reached out and took the phone from my hand. He didn't snatch it. He just took it. Like taking a toy from a child. I shouted at him to give it back. I told him that was theft. I told him he was a corrupt little thief. I used the words I used on the car lot when a mechanic screwed up. I called them monkeys. I called them filth. The room went very quiet. The buzzing in my head got louder. Ritana stood up slowly. She dropped her cigarette on the floor and crushed it with her heel. She spoke to the officer in Thai. Her voice was fast and sharp. She was not the sweet girl who cooked me basil chicken anymore. She was a commander. The officer nodded. He smiled at me. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator looking at a wounded animal. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag. It contained blue pills, the same pills I had just swallowed. He held them up to the light. He asked me if these were mine. I froze. I told him I had a prescription. I lied. He laughed. He told me that possessing restricted narcotics without a prescription was a serious crime. 5 years in prison. Maybe more. I felt the blood drain from my face. The confidence from the tramadol turned into cold terror. I looked at Ritana. I pleaded with her with my eyes. I told her to tell him I was a good man. She walked over to me. She stood very close. I could smell her perfume mixed with the stale smoke. She pulled out her own phone. She swiped the screen and held it up. It was a video. It was a video of me from last night. I was passed out on the bed. But there were things on the bed with me. White powder, a pipe, and a girl who looked much younger than Ritana. I stared at the screen. I had never seen that girl before. I had never touched a pipe. It was a setup, a perfect frame. Ritana whispered in my ear. She told me I had two choices. Choice one was the police station, the drug charges, the underage girl, the prison cell with 50 other men and a hole in the floor for a toilet. She told me I would die in there. She was right. Choice two was simple. I pay the damages for the jet ski, I pay the fine for the drugs, and I pay a service fee to the officer for losing the evidence. My mouth was dry. I asked how much. She named a number. It was everything. It was my savings. It was the money for my rent. It was the cash I needed to renew my business visa next month. I told her I couldn't pay that. I told her I had the elite visa. The officer stepped forward. He tapped the badge on his chest. He spoke in broken English. He told me that the elite visa had a morality clause. Criminal behavior canceled it immediately. He said he could revoke it right now on his tablet. He held up the bag of pills again. He asked if I wanted to be a VIP or a prisoner. The trap clamped shut. I heard the metal teeth grinding against my bone. I was not the hunter. I was not the king. I was just another buffalo. I opened my banking app. My hands shook so hard I dropped the phone twice. Ritana picked it up for me. She held it steady while I scanned the QR code on the officer's phone. I authorized the transfer. 200,000 baht, gone in a second. The officer checked his screen. He nodded. He handed me back my phone. He put the bag of pills in his pocket. He patted me on the cheek. It was humiliating. He told me to go home. He told me Thailand was for good people only. Ritana did not even say goodbye. She walked out with the officer and the jet ski owner. They were laughing. I stood alone in the locker room. The smell of chlorine and mold filled my nose. I sank down onto the bench. The pills were peaking now. The world was soft and fuzzy around the edges. I closed my eyes. I was safe. I was free. I was broke. I stumbled out of the spa an hour later. The sun was setting over the ocean. The sky was purple and bruised. I walked to the nearest 7-Eleven. I bought a bottle of cheap whiskey and a pack of cigarettes. I sat on the curb outside the store. I watched the stray dogs fighting over a scrap of meat. I took a long drink. The burn felt good. It was the only honest thing left in my life. My phone buzzed. It was an email. It was from the Elite Visa Concierge Service. My membership had been suspended pending an investigation into local police reports. They didn't even wait. They took the money and they burned me anyway. I laughed. I laughed until I choked on the whiskey. I looked at the tourists walking by, fresh off the plane, white skin, wide eyes, passports full of hope. They thought they were buying paradise. They thought they were buying love. I raised my bottle to them. I wanted to warn them, but the words wouldn't come out. I was just a crazy foreigner sitting on a curb. I took another pill from my secret stash in my sock. I washed it down with the whiskey. The streetlights started to blur into long streaks of light. Ritana was probably eating seafood right now, buying a new gold necklace, laughing at the stupid Farang who thought he was a king. I wasn't a king. I was just a ghost. and the tide was coming in to wash me away.